So what I was going to do is I had that for the kids, and then I have a little story here that Daniel story. Real short little story I was going to read. But anyway, so my point to you all was going to be, and to the kids, is this is not how it would have been, right? Him just laying relaxed back, and the lions kind of smiling at him, right? I think it would be more like this next picture, right? So can you see how the lions with their fangs, they're trying, they want to, right? It's not exactly biblical because it does say that the angels shut their mouths. But again, maybe in the wording is like shut them in the respect that they couldn't open them more to attack. But this is really more realistic, isn't it? That these lions would have been ready to completely tear Daniel apart if it would not have been for the intervention of the angel and through God's providence. So we don't face lions' dens per se, at least I'm assuming we don't. One time we went to, my mom and Mark and the kids and I went to that huge theater in right outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Has everybody been there? Sight and Sound Theater? Anybody ever be there? And they have a theater that's, I don't even know, maybe 10 times, probably more than that, 20 times the size of this. And then there's a stage that goes like almost halfway around. But then they had curtains. So it was of Daniel. So it was a play with musical, with singing and all of that. And then they enacted Daniel's story and all of that. But then when it was time that he sat in the lion's den, he kind of got on his knees and there was like a spotlight. It was very well done, a spotlight. But then all these curtains had been here, so we didn't know the stage was any bigger. And then all of a sudden they opened up these curtains and then they had all these animatronic lions that were there looking. So it was just such an amazing visual of just the hopelessness that maybe Daniel would have been feeling of like, how on earth am I going to make it through this, right? So I encourage you, if you ever get a chance to drive out to Pennsylvania, maybe we can do a road trip sometime. They still do those, and it's just such a powerful thing to see these Bible stories enacted. But how am I going to get through this? Don't we all have times, maybe you're in that time right now where you are thinking about that. How on earth am I going to get through blank of whatever you're going through? Well, let's look at Daniel to maybe help you out a little bit. So a quick reminder of Daniel's history. He was a noble from Judah. We read that. He was taken captive by King Nebuchadnezzar II of Babylonia in 579 BC. No, I will not quiz you on this stuff, okay? The Babylonians forced Daniel into exile, again, nearly 800 miles from his home. And in Babylon, Daniel was chosen to serve in the royal court. And Daniel became known as an interpreter of dreams and one who received visions. And he did. He predicted just many of things that would be happening. He also was a prophet. Eventually, Daniel was promoted into this position of administrator that we read about in chapter 6, with two others over these 120 satraps that governed the lands of King Darius. And then King Darius, again, was so taken by David that he really considered him to become the sole administrator. Again, almost, we would call it like a prime minister today. So that's where we enter our story today in chapter 6. Well, I got this, some of this from Pastor Owen Burgess, and he kind of took this story and kind of made it into characters, or three types of characters, archetypes. And I really like that idea. So I did borrow some of this from him. That he had the bad, the indifferent, and the good. And I'm changing that a little bit to the bad and the uncommitted, I'm still working on the best word for that, and the good. So let's look at the bad. I think we can kind of all figure out right away maybe who that might be, right? It's these jealous men that were jealous of Daniel's skills and of his relationship with the king. And again, that they knew that he was not one of them. And so again, how can he be top man? Like something's not right. King Darius is just going to keep promoting this guy. We need to do something. And so again, they watched Daniel like a hawk, but to their great annoyance, he's squeaky clean. He never puts a foot wrong. And human nature hasn't changed much in those 2,500 years, right? In many countries of the world, corruption is rife, and the only way to get ahead is to get permissions maybe from an official ruler, or to slip them some money, right, to get what you want. But Daniel would not touch any of that. Try as he may, his colleagues couldn't find any trace of negligence or improper dealing. And if you think about it, sometimes maybe you have friends or family that they try not to see the worst in you, right? They try to overlook those things. But these were enemies that were looking for anything at all, Oh, I saw this person steal some Post-it notes from their office desk and put them in their in their purse or whatever, right? I mean, they were looking for anything they could find. So his conduct was under incredible scrutiny. But again, the Bible says they could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. So how do we stand up against that? How do we stand up against that? There are many non-Christians who obviously are upright of character, but again, how much more should we as Christians be beyond reproach? So do we have high enough standards for ourselves, or do we compare ourselves to others or to what we see on Facebook or what we see on the news and go, well, at least I didn't do that? Or do we hold ourselves accountable, our actions, to that of the actions of Jesus and of these other biblical characters that we have been reading about? So again, his accusers use deceit. They tell the king, these make up, they kind of flatter him, right? And then they make up this law to trap their man. And they tell the king that it's a unanimous decision with the administrators, and I'm sure it was, except for probably not Daniel, right? I'm guessing that they did not check with Daniel, hey, are you okay with this, that we're doing this? Because Daniel would have said, no, I'm not going to worship the king. I'll respect him, but I'm going to worship the one true God, Yahweh. So that was a lie that all the administrators had all agreed. And how often do we use those little white lies to kind of get what we want, or lie to ourselves even, no matter what the consequences are, to hurt other people perhaps? So the bad, we have some of that in us, don't we? Well, let's look at the indifferent or at the uncommitted. King Darius, right? That's who we're heading for. He was a mixed up character. You don't want to like him because he just took over Judah and all these other countries, right? And subjugated them. But there were some good things to him, like anybody, right? He had some positive qualities as well. He had the good sense to promote David to the job, one of the top jobs in the kingdom, even though he wasn't native to Babylon. And then, of course, he was kind of unaware of all the tension, we presume at least, that this caused, because Daniel, again, was not one of theirs. So Daniel's kind of caught up, isn't he, between the bad and the indifferent. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. In the picture of the king outside. So there's Daniel inside the lion's den, and then there's the king. First thing in the morning, couldn't sleep, didn't eat. First thing in the morning, runs down and checks to see if Daniel is still alive. So Daniel found himself caught, right, between the bad and the pretty much uncommitted, right? The wicked schemers and a morally weak king. And we see that also with Joseph, right, that Joseph kind of gets caught in the middle as well. And how much do we see that in ourselves, too, that we sometimes are the guilty ones of not being super committed in our faith, not being willing to say, hey, that's wrong. This is not wrong. This is not right. This needs to be changed. Whether we say it to our friends or our neighbors or whatever. Again, not in a mean way. You're wrong. But that what's happening here, this can't be right. Look who's being hurt. Look who's being subjugated. Look who is not getting justice in their life. We need to work on this, guys, right? So being strong enough in our faith to be able to stand up to injustice. So Daniel was condemned to death, and again, because of Darius's kind of going along with it, which we sometimes do too, there was nothing he could do. He didn't have a leg to stand on, because the guys kept repeating, remember, this rule can't be changed. And it happens all over our lives, right? Evil flourishes when people are silent. Evil flourishes when people are silent. When people let things go, when they don't stand up for what is right, and especially when those who are being subjugated don't have a voice, but yet we maybe do. We need to stand up for those. And it happens all the time, right? Our personal lives, in our community, in our nation. What solves the problem of some can make slaves of others. And again, sometimes you don't even mind so much, maybe your conscience kind of is okay, if you can blame the system, right? Well, that's just how it is. That's just the system. That's just how this particular group of people just are. Okay. But does that make it right? And does that make it okay that we just stand here and watch things happen that we know are not right in our souls, in our spirits? So we need to examine all issues in our lives with the light of Scripture, again, guided by the Spirit. And unless we do, we too can be pretty easily hoodwinked, right? Or allow injustice to happen, as Darius did as well. Darius did see, I think, through the plot, but he could do nothing about it. And to his credit, he did try as hard as he could to find a way to save Daniel. And he did, again, at the end, say, may your God save you. So there was a little bit of belief, right? And then at the end, when he saw what had happened, that God had saved Daniel, then again, talk about a conversion story. But Jesus said to us too, how much more are we blessed when we don't have to actually see it, but when we actually believe. So there was some good to Darius, right? I think we can all agree to that. And again, then as he went beyond, then he became a very vocal supporter of God, the one true God. So I hate to save Daniel for last, but we are. We're saving our protagonist for last. Now, this picture, again, is very different from the other pictures in that Daniel looks older, right? And if you look at the timeline and kind of what was happening, if you kind of look through all that, most scholars believe that he would have been well over 80 when this took place. So a lot of times in our pictures of Daniel, we see, a young, man with, dark brown hair, and young. That's a nice picture in a cartoon, but really Daniel would have been at least 80, if not older, when this event took place. So we can call him good, right? But not necessarily just of what he did, but in the sense of what he was, a man of faith. His relationship with God was the most important thing in his life. Nothing was allowed to get in the way. So here was a man who had his priorities straight. No matter how Babylonian he was, maybe, and in some of his lifestyle, although again, he didn't eat their food, he ate the food that he knew was proper with his Jewish upbringing. But he still lived in the palace, right? So there were some things that he was of the world that he was living in. No matter how loyal he was to his duties or to the country that he was adopted, that he had adopted, kind of forced to adapt, he never failed to let it be known to everybody around him that the most precious thing to him was not found in Babylon, but was found in Jerusalem. Daniel was separated, from his homeland by many miles. What do we say, about 800? Just as we are separated from our heavenly home, as we are here on this temporary place that we all live in, these temporary bodies, that we know our citizenship is in heaven, but yet God puts us here to do things for him, for his sake and for the sake of others. The prophet Jeremiah wrote of God's covenant. He said, I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. So it's not the things that are here, even though this church is beautiful and we're doing everything we can to preserve it for many, many years to come. It's the temple of the heart. That's what matters, is what our heart looks like as well. So Daniel, again, is one of God's success stories. Most of the ones we're talking about, right, this summer, ends up that way. Although there's ups and downs, right? With Jonah, we'll talk about that. Jonah, please go and tell these people in Nineveh that they need to get their act together or I'm going to kill them. And Jonah says, no thanks, God. Go ahead and kill them. They're horrible people. So we see, again, all that happens. So no one's path is straight, just like in our weaving. In fact, thank you to somebody who put the crooked piece in, because I had said that. I'm like, I like it, but none of our lives are completely, oh yeah, everything's pretty good, everything's pretty good, everything's pretty good, right? But our stories are huge ups, right? Huge highs in our lives, huge depths of despair. And then everything in between, and whether we like it or not, our lives are entwined with other people's lives, with the story that they tell as well. I told you I was going to talk about the window. Daniel kept his windows open towards Jerusalem. And again, I think there's some lovely symbolism there. I couldn't find a picture of window, but there's some lovely symbolism that, to me, that it speaks of what Daniel's heart and soul were open Godward. So there was nothing, not even like whatever it would have been, again, probably some wicker. They didn't have glass, right? But maybe a wicker covering over the window to keep out the elements or birds or whatever. But not even that did he allow him to separate him from looking to Jerusalem and to just putting God first in his life. So Daniel's heart and soul, again, were God-facing. And we sometimes allow other things to bog us down, that we are not facing God. We're facing maybe everything else but that. Our priorities, right, get so messed up in a secular world. And again, I really try so carefully to not preach on this very much, because I don't want people to think, oh, she's preaching to come to church every week. Oh, because there's not, she wants more people there. Well, to be honest, I would love that. And part of that is because there is a certain energy with more people. Think Christmas Eve, think Easter, right? That people are here, so there's energy there that's just created from those people. And so then, I feel like, I can sing louder because these other people are singing right here next to me, right? So there is something to that. But at the same time, and I understand that we can worship at home. We can worship when we're out in nature. All those different things happen, but we are called to make it a priority. And just sometimes when we're out, at least I know I'm horrible at staycations, and so is Mark. We're very bad at that because then there's other things that we do, right? I have every intention of I'm going to do a puzzle today. I'm just going to sit and relax and do a puzzle. And then there's 50 other things that are calling me away. And that happens. So I'm not saying that it's not important. Yes, that people need to be able to have those times to go on vacation and do all these different things. But there is something about gathering together as God's people. And again, you're with us watching from home, which we appreciate so much. And I pray that that you feel the Spirit coming to you. And I think that's absolutely possible. But there is something also about being here in these pews, in this beautiful sanctuary, being here together, that you have that opportunity to share and to talk. There's something about that. There's something about gathering together as God's people, all of us raising our voices in song. And again, I understand there are more than 50 very legitimate reasons why some people cannot come into the building. And again, I totally respect that, and those are legitimate. But I just ask that sometimes that if we think about it am I making church a priority? Am I making worship a priority? And again, you don't have to come in here. You could go out in nature and sit or walk, or go to a different church, whatever you want to do. But are we putting God first? And that was the biggest thing as I'm reading about Daniel, is that God, he put God first. And again, I don't know how that looks to you, but to me, I look at the scriptures. And the scriptures say I spend daily time in the scriptures. I pray. I spend time with my brothers and sisters in Christ, worshiping. So those are all things that we're called to do. And I do think it's important that we take time to just examine ourselves and examine our lives. And are we putting God first? I'm not saying this church necessarily or me. I'm saying just blanket statement, God, however that looks to you. And one of the things I mentioned just now is the idea of praying and prayer. So here's another picture of Daniel praying. What did Daniel do when he heard of this evil scheme? Did he panic? No. What does he say? Our scriptures say 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed. Now this isn't on his knees. Mark, if you can turn the, please. He's not on his knees, but 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to God, just as he had done before. Yesterday we finished moving Katie down in Columbus, and so on the drive, must have been a drive down because it was like midnight on the drive back, and I wouldn't have probably seen this sign. So it must have been the drive down, and there was a sign that said, oh, I even wrote it down as I was driving real quick so that I would remember it. God answers knee mail. That's what it was. Something like that. So instead of email, right, knee mail. And I thought of it immediately because I was like, that's what the scriptures say Daniel was doing. And again, some of us couldn't get down on our knees if we tried to pray, right? And there's all kinds of prayer postures. So that's not the important thing. But it's taking the time to be humble, which a knee posture does, right? Because it lowers you. But it's taking the time to do that. Not just, I'm going to pray real quick. Hey, thanks God for the food. And off I go. But it's when you kneel, you're taking time. You're in a different posture. It's not easy to quickly go do something else. So you're like showing subservience, and you're showing that this is what I'm doing right now. I'm not multitasking. I am praying to you first and foremost. So again, I don't know what prayer posture you use. There's all different ones. You can, whatever. Close your eyes, not close your eyes. Fold your hands, not fold your hands. But the most important thing is, are you focusing on God when you are in prayer? So Daniel was a man of prayer. And again, the habit of prayer is something to be cultivated. It requires deliberate decision to devote time and energy to that. And again, we know that Jesus talked about prayer. We know that throughout our scriptures, we'll see it over and over and over, how prayer was so important to Daniel's life. So we need to kind of calibrate, right? I know it's summer, so yeah, we've been doing some fun things too. I want to go out and do, different things. Oh, it's summer, so let's go get ice cream, or let's go on a nice walk. So of course, you want to enjoy life. But throughout every season of our life, if you think about it, there's always an excuse, right? Well, but if it's this or that, and well, I'm so busy right now, so maybe next week I'll have more time. At least in my life, that every time I have a very good intention, I can come up with an excuse for everything as to why it's not quite time yet to do whatever it is that I know I should do, but yet I really don't want to necessarily do. So I encourage us now, I encourage us every day of every year, every moment of every life that we each have, to really think about that. Where are our priorities? Are we taking time to give God our best, our first fruits of our time and our energy and our love? And are we helping other people, because that's what we're called to do? And are we spending time with God in prayer? I know it's a lot, but maybe just my challenge to you is this week to do one thing. You know what? I never crack open my Bible. I'm going to read Daniel. And it's not that long. I can't remember how many chapters, but, I'm going to read the book of Daniel this week. Or I'm going to take 5 minutes in the mornings, or I'm going to do this or that, or I haven't been to church in how long? I'm going to go to a church. Again, don't come to this church, no worries. But go find a community of believers, wherever that is. Maybe it's not even a church. Maybe it's an AA meeting. Maybe it's another group that is spiritual. Just find a group that will bring you support and love and in a sense of us working all together. That's what sets us apart, right? We are, kind of like, you could find your soccer team, right? Or you could find your soccer mom's club. But there's something specific about us as Christians, right? That we gather together to support each other, as the scriptures tell us. But most importantly, we gather together to worship Jesus, to worship God, and to pray for the Holy Spirit to impact us in our lives.